The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Welcome to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And we are talking Ghost Hunting 101 once again. And this week we're talking about EVPs.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Everybody wants to get an EVP. I mean, it is really cool to get an EVP.
And for folks like us who've kind of worked in the audio industry of radio, your husband Dave, you, me, like radio, audio is really something that is, I don't want to say profound, but it's something that's really ingrained in what we do. And so we're so used to when you hear something, you believe it because you heard it. And so when you hear something that wasn't there because you're using some sort of recording device, it kind of stands out as something interesting. Now, a lot of people misrepresent EVPs. Mm-hmm. EVPs are typically audio that's captured on some sort of recording device that's not heard by the human ear. So an EVP would not be something that we would hear on, say, a spirit box session. An EVP would not necessarily be conversation that you hear. A disembodied voice, for instance, is not really an EVP.
Right.
An EVP is when something is recorded, you listen back to it, and there is a voice or there's a phrase or there's something said that wasn't there when you recorded. That's really, truly an EVP.
Right. Audible voices, audible words, screams, yells, sounds, knocks, those are not considered EVP if you are hearing them in real time. It's only if you're listening afterwards. Now, EVP stands for electronic voice phenomena.
Right.
And they have been, I think the first, don't quote me on this because I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but I thought it was neat. I think the first EVP was discovered right around the 1940s, if I'm not mistaken. And today, it's really the staple or one of the staples of an investigation. A lot of people use different types of equipment in order to do, some of them call them call and return sessions, question and answer sessions, EVP sessions. There's a lot of different names for it. But essentially what you're doing is you're trying to communicate with the spirits and you're asking them questions and you're asking them to respond to you. And if they do, the theory is that it's essentially just stamping into the audio of the piece of equipment that you're using. And then when you play it back, you can hear them actually talking to you.
So obviously, right now we've got digital equipment, right? We record with digital. Now, I have just recently used a little tape recorder. I mean, there's still those around. And there's some things that are really nice about those, but there's also some downsides because of the fact that sometimes you get the noise of the tape hissing. Sometimes you get, if the mic is right on the unit, it'll pick up the mechanics within the recorder. But like in the old days, they had those big reel-to-reel tapes that they would bring out, and that's what they would set up to get EVPs.
Yeah.
I have a very interesting story about EVPs, and you and I have both gotten EVPs before.
Yes.
And again, because of our background in radio, it's kind of a big deal to us. Because if we hit record on this podcast and we record all this and then we listen back and there's a voice that says, Sandy, in the middle of nowhere, that's an EVP, right?
Or you guys suck.
Right,
you know,
right.
That kind of thing.
What's your phrase? You don't know, Todd, blah, blah, blah. What were you say?
Screw you, Todd.
Screw you, Todd. That's right.
You don't know what a good EVP is.
Todd. Something like that. Lloyd Auerbach, who is a paranormal psychologist, and had done some work with us on the Haunted State series, actually told a story of how, do you remember in the old days when you would buy cassette tapes at like Kmart or whatever? You get like 6 in a thing.
Yes.
They weren't great quality, but you used them, right?
Right.
Just because you tape Casey Kasem on Saturday or Sunday so that you could have all your favorite songs for the week.
Laying on the floor on my stomach with the little boombox, the radio, getting ready to play that song and push those 2 buttons.
That's right.
Okay.
He told a story about an instance where they took some of those cassette tapes, still wrapped up, put them in a room, not in a machine, just laying there, and did an EVP session. And they received confirmation on one of the cassettes.
That's amazing.
But think about it. What cassettes are, what tape is it's magnetic is what it is.
Right.
So when it's recording, it's basically just taking the magnetic composition of this tape and rearranging it to then play back what was placed on it. And so somehow the voices ended up on this magnetic tape, and they weren't even taken out of the cellophane yet.
It's pretty amazing. You know, one of the theories is that it's picking up radio waves that are going through the air.
Mm-hmm.
Possible, I guess. I don't know how to specifically explain me asking what color was your dress and hearing the word red.
Right.
I don't. It doesn't quite sit with me, although obviously anything is a possibility. We can't prove, but we can't disprove either way. But because let's face it, no matter what you do, someone is always going to say, well, that's not true or that's not possible. And it's always a back and forth for, forever. But that was one of the theories. And I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to it. I've gotten enough EVPs. I've done this enough times to hear really intelligent responses to questions that I ask. It would have to be incredibly random for that to happen.
I have to tell you a real quick story about like people who just don't want to believe. And again, you and I have never been people who want to make someone believe in ghosts. We just want to discuss our experiences. So a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to be a guest on a network radio show talking about our experiences, ghost hunting, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And had great response to the show. I was immediately invited back because of the number of people that were responding and texting and listening and all that. So they took that episode that I was on and actually replayed it a couple of days later during the day, during what would normally be a talk show about politics. Mm-hmm. But they're changing hosts and they needed fill content. So they took the best listened to segments throughout the week and they created the show out of it, which is kind of cool, except that people who are looking for political talk got me talking about ghosts and they were not happy. And I was called a grifter pushing my grift is basically what was said.
I've known you for a long time, Todd. I don't think anybody's ever called you a grifter.
Never.
Before.
I've never been called a grifter. And
pushing your grift.
So the funny thing was I'm sitting there and I get all the texts that come across all of our stations. They come across my phone. I get to see them. And as the show started, I'm thinking, oh, God, maybe this wasn't a good idea to put me talking about ghosts on at 2:00 in the afternoon or 3:00 or whenever the hell it was. And I was right, because there was one guy who just would not let up on me. And I had the ability, if I wanted to text him back. And I had to fight really hard not to press the little button that allows a manager in the company to respond to stuff like that. But he ended up doing some other stupid stuff to another talk show host like a couple days later, and his phone line's been completely banned off the text line. So we'll never hear from him again. But yes, I've been called a grifter pushing my grift.
Pushing your grift?
And then I'm sitting here going, okay, I kind of know what a grifter is. What is pushing my grift? So I had to
How
go
do you
on.
push your grift?
Well, apparently that's what I was doing, according to this individual.
Wow. There are some people, though, that just like to cause trouble.
But I will also say that we gained some listeners for the podcast because of both shows. And
that's awesome.
Somebody here in Wisconsin that happens to have a paranormal group down in Racine reached out and said, hey, I'm listening to you right now. Are you live? And I'm like, no, we recorded it, blah, blah, blah. But now we've talked about maybe teaming up and doing some stuff together as well.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's so cool.
Sorry about the tangent, but I wanted to tell that story because...
that's okay. I think that's really cool because anytime we get new listeners, we get new people who reach out to us for any reason with ideas or thoughts or comments. It really makes me happy. And I think that's so cool. And the fact that you brought in a few new listeners, and again, like you said, we never push our thoughts and opinions on anyone else. We just share our thoughts and opinions. And it's up to everybody else to form their opinion around it. And like I always say, I'm so grateful for the support because we do this not only because it's a chance for you and I after a long week to really wind down and catch up and see and talk to each other and see each other, but it's a chance for us to share with everybody else because I don't think that people, as a general rule, are willing or able to talk about this type of stuff indiscriminately. And so I like that we give everybody a chance to do that. Everybody gets a chance to do that. So. And
also, not everybody who investigates agrees with everything we say, and we don't agree with everything other investigators say.
Not at all.
But there is for most, there's a respect level, I would hope. I would hope that others understand that I respect their thoughts and their processes, even though it may not align with what I believe or the way I investigate. I usually, unless they are really just over the top and rude and
clowns.
Then I'll say, listen, hit the bricks. But other than that, I want to know what other people are trying and doing because we could learn more from them.
I think one thing that all people who investigate have in common is a respect for the other in their as investigators. You may do something differently than I do or have a different opinion, but it's all based on our own experience. It's not based on anything, any rule book. It's all based on our experience. My experiences are completely different than, Seth Jones down the street or
and
yours.
Mine are different than yours, right? Yeah.
Right. Because it's a very personal thing. There are some teams that refuse to use a medium. A psychic, a medium. I don't necessarily agree with that, not only because I am one, but I just believe that in order to have a well-rounded investigation, I think that you need both the science, aka the equipment, and you need the personal experiences, the psychics and the mediums, if they are available, people who can really bring it together. Because in essence, my belief is that we are all here to learn, to share, and to tell stories. That's what this is all about. So just because I don't agree with these groups, though, doesn't mean I don't respect them.
Right.
Because in their own way, they get what they're looking for. And so how can I not respect somebody for sticking to their guns and doing what they do and getting the results that they get and being proud of it? It's not hurting anybody to do it differently than each other. So, I think that there is a level, as with anything, I think as in politics, as in, animal rescue, charitable fundraising, anything like that. Maybe I do it differently than someone else, but I respect that they do it their way. So we totally got off on a tangent here.
That's okay.
But it is. But, okay, so getting back to EVPs, and the other thing, when you were talking about Lloyd Auerbach, because I had been kind of following him and watching him for several years, I respect him as well. And he has some interesting thoughts and opinions on things, any kind of investigation or psychic phenomena or anything like that himself, which, again, I don't necessarily 100% agree with everything he says or thinks.
Right.
But I respect that he has the experience to form that opinion that he has. And so it brings me back to, the 70s and the 80s when they were actually Hans Holzer. You'd see video of him, and he had the great big reel-to-reel, and he would record on the reel-to-reel. And so we've come really, really far since then. But I also am kind of interested in getting back to old school once in a while too.
Yeah.
Like the old school ones, the rectangular ones, the black ones that you'd push the buttons and the tape would flip up, tape recorders, things like that. So I kind of am getting into that groove. I kind of want to use one of the Instamatic Kodak cameras occasionally and see. I got to get my hands on one of those and try those. So I think that anything that works for you personally is great. Whatever your preference is. And there's all kinds. There's the digital recorders now. And one thing that I want to say about digital recorders is you do not have to spend $200 on a digital recorder in order for it to work well for you. I have two. I use one that I carry with me for EVP sessions. And then I'll take the other one and I'll leave it separately in another room that I think is active, and I'll just let it run. So if our investigation is 2.5, 3 hours, it'll run for 2.5, 3 hours. And what that will do will catch any noises that or words or singing or whatever it may be, groans and moans, that we aren't in the area to hear, but maybe going on. And we're going to play some examples of EVPs that I used, one of the four that I used in that manner. And it was probably one of the best, most intriguing, and exciting EVPs I ever got using that method. So there's digital recorders, your old school tape recorders. I don't suggest the reel-to-reel. That's a little too much.
I don't know. I've got one right behind me. I could tag it along.
I know. You could carry it. You could get yourself a little. Do you remember when you had the purse?
No,
you could put it in the little bag.
I'll carry it on my back in a backpack.
You could bring a little cart. You could pull it along on your little cart, Todd. And
don't make fun of the grifter. He's just trying to push his grift.
Pushing your grift. But again, you don't have to spend a lot of money. I think one of them was $32 and one of them was $22. And I've had them for several years now. They are rechargeable. They don't need batteries. They're fantastic, and I love them. So very inexpensive, works just as well as very expensive. And you can also use your phone. A lot of people don't realize this, but you can use the recording app on your phone, and they work very well. Today's phones are very sensitive, and they will pick things up. I actually have done that. I used my phone because I had a very impromptu stop at the Garrett Smith estate a couple summers ago. Dave and I were driving around, so I didn't bring equipment because we were just planning on going somewhere. And I said, Dave, let's stop over there at the Smith estate for the 18,000th time. And I took my phone and I went over to one area that I really felt drawn to. And I asked the question, what was the question I asked? Are you happy that you're here? Because I one time saw what I believed to be a runaway slave peering out at me from behind one of the buildings on the estate. Now, again, this was in my mind's eye. It was a psychic impression, but she was for that few seconds that I saw her, she was as real as anything else. So I had a feeling that there was going to be somebody in there. And I said, are you happy to be here? And I got a definitive no. Now, I didn't hear that in real time. It was only after I got back to camp and I plugged my phone into the thing and I downloaded the audio that I actually heard the EVP. So phones, they do work. They do work well. So you can use those. And of course, video cameras.
Mm-hmm.
We've investigated with video cameras lots and lots and lots of times. Not only are you getting video, but you can convert that video into audio and you can listen to it and review it that way. So those are the main ways that most people record EVPs. And they don't have to be very expensive.
You've actually lined up some examples of EVPs that you've gotten over the years. Should we go through some of them?
Yeah, I know we've done a handful of them over the years here on the show. So I wanted to pick some that were never shown before.
Okay.
And the first one that I want to share with everybody was just done at the end of this past November. Dave and I were in Saranac Lake, New York for the Metaphysical Expo, the Moonbow Metaphysical Expo put on by a member of our paranormal group, Adirondack Park Paranormal Society, Christina Bloom. Christina is an amazing woman, amazing investigator, and amazing psychic medium. And so we went up there and we actually stayed in one of the old cure cottages. And from the moment that I stepped in the door of that cure cottage, I felt like I had eyes on me. I felt like I was being watched. And that's only really happened to me one other time. The previous summer, a place in Troy, New York that we stayed at, it was the same thing. So I knew it was going to be active in there. My feeling was both residual and also intelligent, and both proved to be correct. So the first night of the 2 nights, Dave and I took the recorder and we took the Mel meter that had the REM pod on it, and we had the Tempest, which is sort of like the Ovilus. It'll spit out words. And we were just asking some questions. And so this was one of the cool EVPs that we got when we were asking some questions.
Did you ever stay there?
So
I'm going to play that one more time, okay?
Okay,
All right.
yeah.
Here it comes.
Did you ever stay there?
Okay, so was that the Tempest at the beginning?
That was the Tempest at the beginning, and I can't remember what the word was.
I heard it say quack, quack, something like that, right?
It was quacking like a duck at one point.
Right. But then, okay, I'm just going to tell you what I hear.
Okay.
I hear almost like either singing or like a group of people going, oh.
Yes. It was, I think, I didn't know anything about this cottage the first night. I actually, after we had some stuff going on, the second night I did look up what was going on, what had happened in this cure cottage, this particular one. And apparently some of the things that they would do would be to have a chorus. They would sing together. There was another EVP that we got from night one of 2 or 3 females, 3 women having a full-on conversation. Now, we didn't hear this at the time. It was only afterwards that now they sang pretty badly, I'm going to admit. Nobody was in tune. But I really believe that we caught them singing. Now, was that intelligent or residual? It was a very heavy residual presence in there.
Yeah.
I feel like they were just basically going on about their day and evening for the most part. However, we did get some intelligent responses as well. During the night, we had some noises. We had footsteps going up and down the stairs that weren't ours, and we don't think there was anybody in that house. It was like a bottom floor. Our apartment was on the 2nd floor, and then there was a efficiency apartment on the 3rd floor. Nobody was in there except us that night, and we got some footsteps and weird things going on, but definitely some singing going on, or attempting to sing. Attempting.
All right.
That sounds like if you and Dave and I were trying to sing together, that's what we'd get.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that was an example of an EVP. So the second one I want to show you guys is from Fort Ontario in Oswego, New York. Dave and I took a ride out there in September 9th, I think it was, of 2022. It was a very, very old fort. It had seen many different things over the years. It was from the 1700s. It was rebuilt a couple of times. It saw the French and Indian War. It was part of the Civil War. It was also a shelter, the biggest shelter in the United States for Jewish refugees during the Holocaust. And so it was just an amazing place to visit. And I was smart enough to bring my digital recorder with me as we did a walkabout of the place. One of the interesting things, just as an aside, I had my K2 meter with me also. And when we went into one of the, I don't know what they call them, like the ammunition bunkers, those kinds of things, they had a iron door, looked like a jail door on the front of it, so you couldn't walk in there. It's interesting to note that it's only open in the summer months and there's no electricity at all, except for in the office area and the gift shop area, but nothing else has electricity. And my K2 was going crazy in that area. I also got a few things in the enlisted men's quarters, but this one was interesting. There was one jail cell in the fort, and it was right at the entrance. And so we had stopped in there quickly for a moment on the way in. And then before we left, we stopped back in the jail cell. And I was talking to the presence that I felt in there, and the K2 meter was going off a bit. So here's what I asked this gentleman.
Was
at
this
Fort Ontario?
Was this the guardhouse?
The guardhouse.
All right.
Yes, with the jail.
Are you mad that I'm in here?
Well,
He was mad that I was there.
and it was just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, he was mad. And there was nobody around us. I mean, it was September, so the kids were in school. There was really nobody near us. There was maybe 3 other people other than the volunteers who were dressed up, and they were on the other side of the fort. And so, yeah, so that was another one. Did not hear anything at the time. But when I got home and listened to the audio, he apparently was not happy that I was in his presence.
Let's play that one more time.
Are you mad that I'm in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying this is a joke, but it almost sounds like Dave's voice. And I'm just,
Well, he's always mad that I'm
that's what I'm saying.
here.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. Can we go, honey? I've been on my feet all day.
He has got to be one of the most patient men I have ever met in my life, because I go off on these crazy tangents when it comes to
Everything.
ghosts and everything in my life. Yes, thanks, Todd. And so he is just so he is so patient.
I'm
with
pretty
it.
sure. I mean, I know he's Jewish, but I'm pretty sure if he were Catholic, he would already been made a saint. I mean,
I know, right?
yes.
So speaking of Jewish, so like I said, there were, I believe it was anywhere from 900 to 1,000 Jewish people who were staying in probably less than wonderful conditions at the fort during the Holocaust, Jewish refugees. And conditions weren't great, but it was better than what they would face, obviously. So they all made as happy of a life for themselves as they could. However, there was also a lot of negative things going on. And there was a lot of negative things going on throughout the centuries there. I don't necessarily know when this would have taken place. It's a little disturbing. It was very disturbing to me when I got home and heard it. It was in one of the officers' quarters, and in this particular officers' quarters, it was set up as a memorial to all the Jewish people who passed through the doors. And I had an amazing conversation with a woman while we were in there via the K2 meter. I have never seen that K2 meter go off the way it did. Up until that point, I had never seen it go off the way it did until I was talking to this woman. Then we went upstairs, and this is where I recorded this, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
All right, now let me say what I hear, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like there's a whole school of kids and adults walking upstairs or walking down halls and talking and giggling or screaming or something. We'll play it one more time, but that's what, I hear.
Okay.
That's creepy because you kind of hear a scream and then you hear ha, 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 ha.
Yeah. So just to set it up a little bit, there was nobody in there with us. We were the only ones in there. And the walking sound was us.
Okay.
Because they were all old hardwood floors. So the walking sound, and they were very creaky because it was, very old. And so the walking sound was us. The noise that you hear in the background, we were on the second floor. The noise you hear in the background are the videos that they have playing down in the main section. So you can hear the hum of the noise of people, but it's just a humming.
Right.
And it's actually, I think, worked well to sort of keep out other outside noise. It sort of gives it that white noise sound.
Yep.
It most definitely was a scream. And it doesn't it sound almost like to you, Todd, like the old time villain with the mustache?
Yes.
And he'd ha, ha, ha. Yeah. And I hesitate to say what the situation it may have been, but again, you've got you've got women living in there all throughout the centuries in that fort. It was its own little village in a lot of ways. The officers' wives would live there. Their, families would live there. God only knows what would go on there, but that was probably, I would say, probably the absolute creepiest and most uncomfortable EVP I have ever gotten. We did not hear any woman screaming. We did not hear any man laughing while we were walking around. It was actually really quiet. So I don't know. But that was very creepy. It sounded to me like a woman was screaming and then a man was leeringly laughing, if that's a way to say it, leeringly laughing at her like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. Again, that was at Fort Ontario in Oswego, New York, right on Lake Ontario. And the final one is probably one of the best EVPs I've ever gotten. It was very surprising. This was at a local hotel/restaurant. It was built in the early 1800s. I can't really say where it was because it is part of our Empire Spirit show that should hopefully be coming out soon. We've had some delays with it, but it should be coming out soon. It will be episode 2. And it had quite the past. It was built near water on limestone and had some tragic things happen there. It was also Native American land at one point. So a lot was going on there. And during the investigation, I took one of my recorders with me. The other recorder I left down in a room that was just off the bar area. And while we were all upstairs, now we were locked in, we locked ourselves in. So it was just our group. There was no one else there. No one would have walked in. And when I listened back to that recorder that I left downstairs for a few hours that night, now this is amazing. This is what I got.
So I have a comment about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to know if this is a true EVP or a disembodied sound, right? Because
Yes.
if you had been there and not heard the footsteps, then it would be an EVP.
Yes, you are 100% correct. This is a tough one to categorize because we weren't there.
Right.
Physically, we weren't there. So while you're 100% right, because while I call it an EVP, because to me, at this point, it's an EVP, we weren't there to hear it audibly. If we had been there to hear it audibly, that would have been even more amazing.
Yeah.
That would have taken it to a whole new level. So there were actually 12 minutes of this audio. This is 12 seconds, but there were 12 minutes of this. Definite male boots. The interesting thing about this audio is that normally when somebody would come in a door and they go through the bar area and they go to the tables in the next room, which is where this was recorded, you would hear a noise of approaching steps. They would get louder and louder. They would start very faint and get louder and louder. And then when they left, you would hear it getting quieter and quieter. In this case, the boot steps actually just started. And then they just stopped. There was nothing, a warning that it was coming or listening to it fade away. It was just that. And as this male was walking around the tables, it was almost as if he was checking out our equipment because he'd stop. It was very casual. He would stop. It was like he was looking at stuff to see what we had. He was trying to check out what was going on. And then he would be gone. And each minute of this audio, 12 minutes of this audio, was just absolutely strong and loud and amazing. I have never played this on here before because I was hoping that by the time I played it, the show would be out, but the show wasn't. But I thought this was a great example of, like you said, can it be both? It kind of can be both.
It kind of can because we don't have the answer to categorize it.
Exactly.
Just as like, could this be intelligent? Could this be residual? It could be one or the other or both.
Or both.
We could be hearing the sounds of something that happened 200 years ago or whatever, right? That just replays itself over and over and over.
Right.
Or it could have been intelligent, like you said, coming into the room and going, what the hell's this equipment out here? What is this crazy
on?
stuff? Right.
Why are these people here right now? And what's also interesting is that we got, again, not 100% sure it was an EVP because we weren't down there, but we got someone saying very loudly, hello, about 5 minutes before that in the bar area. Now, again, there was nobody in there except us. We were all upstairs for most of the investigation. That's why I left the recorder downstairs. So was it an EVP? Was it audible? Would it have been audible if we were down? If it was audible, Todd, I would have been so freaking excited because to be in a room and hear something like that in front of you would have been absolutely amazing.
I'm not going to lie to you. It would have shook me up a little bit.
I know. I would have been like, what the, but again, I treat it like an EVP because we weren't there. But it's just probably one of the clearest, most amazing things I probably have ever recorded. Had no idea I was going to get that. None whatsoever. And I will tell you that location, because of the water, because of the limestone, because of the history in the building itself, because of the building was built in, I think, 1827. Because of the land history belonging to the Native Americans, things like that, it was probably it was one of the most active places I have ever been in. I saw a shadow figure in the kitchen. We did a spirit box session where a man came through and said that he was killed by the Native Americans. I mean, it was just crazy, the things that were going on. There was a little boy in the old ballroom. So much going on. So really, I really wanted to share that with everybody because I think it's fascinating.
That almost sounds like a book title. So you remember the old Nancy Drew books? Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I'm thinking of Sandy Jean and the little boy in the, what was it? Little boy in the ballroom. Yes. Right? That would be a great, and then there would be on the cover, it would be a drawing or a painting of you with a candle kicking around the corner into the ballroom.
But I'd kind of be like in that suspended animation that they used to do on the Nancy Drew book, because I collected those. Yeah. I had almost all of the original ones, the blue hardbacks, but I collected those. So I love those. Yeah, I'd love to be a Nancy Drew book. That would be great.
Sandy Jean and the little boy in the ballroom. By who wrote those?
Oh, come on. Don't make me. It's been a long day.
Cleary comes up, but that's not who it is.
Oh, my God. Why don't I know? Because I collected these books. Are you looking it up?
Yeah. Nancy Drew is written by...
Keene.
Yes,
Keene.
You're right. Carol Keene or Carolyn Keene?
Carolyn Keene.
That's right.
Yes. You said Beverly Cleary. I'm like, wait a minute. That's Ramona and Beezus.
I don't know Ramona and Beezus, but she must have done something else too.
She probably did. So anyways, so that was just, I wanted to share with everybody some of my EVPs that I've collected. I have so many. I was going through this morning trying to decide what the heck I was going to play because I have so many. So it's easy to do. EVPs are very easy as long as you do. Let's talk about, before we let everybody go, let's talk about a couple quick tips for EVPs. One of the first ones that comes to my mind is don't do very long sessions. You want to keep it to about 15, 20 minutes because for two reasons. Number one, it's very difficult to review evidence if it's 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Even when I leave mine down, I only go through about a half hour at a time. It's very slow going for me because you can only do so much at a time and you start to get distracted easily. And
most of the time, there's nothing there. So the real bit of doing investigating is there's a lot of time when nothing is happening. And you have to, not only do you go through that when you investigate, but then you have to go through it again to really look at your evidence. Yes, a lot of stuff. There are exceptions. Sure. There are definitely exceptions, but most of the time that you're investigating is sitting around in the dark with nothing going on. Absolutely nothing. You know, that's why people bring food to investigations so you can take breaks and go eat and do stuff like that. Because a lot of the time is just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for something to happen. You don't get possessed in every investigation. Hopefully never. Hopefully never. TV is nothing like what really happens in investigations. It's still exciting. It's more exciting. I guess it's pretty exciting for me because I connect with them more than someone who might not have those kinds of abilities, but it's still a lot of just sitting around. So make sure that you do shorter sessions, and also make sure that when you ask a question, that you ask questions that are a little outside the box. Do you know that you're dead? Have you been here a long time? Those are questions that are less likely to get a response than something like, what was your favorite song when you were alive? So think of questions that are a little outside the box that a spirit might actually want to answer, especially if you go to a place that's been investigated many, many times and they hear the same things over and over again. They're more likely to want to communicate with you if you ask them things that they would like to talk about, right? Trigger questions that might be from their era. What was your favorite song in the 1930s? Or did you have a favorite cartoon? Anything like that. Anything at all like that. And the other thing I would suggest is give it some time in between questions
whether you take turns, if you're sitting in a circle, if you take turns asking questions, wait a little while, because not all spirits can answer you right away. There are different strengths, different abilities. And if they want to answer you, they may not be able to do it right away. So just give it a little bit of time. You don't have to be in a rush. You don't have to talk over each other. Give it a little bit of time. And that way they'll be able to have enough time to answer your questions.
Plus, again, we don't understand everything. Maybe the sound of our voice doesn't immediately transpire to them. Like maybe there's a delay there too. I mean, we just don't know, right?
We know 0.5% of everything that goes on. The rest of it is all hypothesis, and this is what we think could be going on. So just be mindful of those kinds of things, and I think you'll have more success.
I wanted to take a moment to bring up something that you made me aware of on YouTube recently in the last couple of weeks. And it's a series called Travel the Dead with Katrina Weidman. Is that it?
Yes.
Weidman?
Yes.
Heather Taddy and a couple of other people. And the reason I want to bring it up is because there's not a lot of new content out there for paranormal research. And I've always been a fan of Katrina. You said, have you seen these? And I said, no. And I checked them out. And so this is what I want to say. If you're listening to this podcast and you want a pretty true representation of what it's like to do an investigation, and you want to look at not only the showing up and the asking of the questions, but taking the equipment and having almost nothing happen. I mean, if you really kind of want to get a feel for it, this is a great place for you to check that out.
Without a doubt.
Because there are very long periods of time where there's just nothing going on, and then maybe a little something, and then nothing, and then more of something. We watch these TV shows that are an hour long on these networks, and they pack as much in as they possibly can. And you think that people get the idea that you investigate, you just roll up in your big black van that says the name of your group on the back, right? And you've got all this equipment to bring in. That's not how this show was done. This was done with bare minimum equipment, a lot of time and energy put into asking questions, researching, finding things out, looking at past evidence, and then going out and actually investigating. And I was really impressed by it. I wasn't blown away by anything that happened necessarily. Nothing went, oh my God, that's incredible, right? But that's what 97% of the investigations you do will be like that. And then the other 2 or 3%, because my math is bad, will be the ones where something really big happens and you go, holy crap, this changes my whole thought process.
Dave and I have watched 2 of her investigations on YouTube so far. I love that a lot of the TV personalities are now switching to YouTube. It's so much more accessible. They are so much more, I guess, authentic.
Yep.
They stay really true to themselves. We watch she does it in sets of 3. So it's part 1, part 2, and part 3 of each location. We watched the Fort Mifflin. That's outside of Philadelphia. And that was excellent. And we also watched the one that was the undisclosed
farmhouse,
farmhouse, which was excellent. And I love that Katrina tells the story, because that's what I try to do. I try to tell the story. It's not just about, ooh, are we going to see a ghostie tonight? It's about telling the story, learning the history, and getting the full story of everything that's going on. And it was very well done. She does a great job. She knows what she's doing. And that's really great, because she can do a great job knowing what she's doing with just very bare minimum things.
Yeah. And a great group of people, too.
And a great group of people.
Heather Taddy is great. I really like her. I actually friended her on Facebook, so I might reach out and go, hey, want to be on a podcast? And see what she says.
You should. Seriously, I respect them very much, because they really do go for the story. At one point in the farm one, Katrina says she's alone in the dark and she says, I'm really, really off right now. She says, I'm really nervous. She goes, I would not sleep here by myself. And it's funny. She goes, and I know it's weird hearing me say that, but it is funny because when she did Paranormal Lockdown, she did like 3 or 4 seasons with Nick Groff. That's one of the things they did was they would separate and sleep in separate parts of the location for the night. And she always did really well that we saw on TV. But in this case, she said, I would not sleep here by myself at night. So spoiler alert, one of the locations they go to is actually a location that she's been to before with Nick. And the room that she slept in is one that nobody wants to be in. So look for that. Interesting. Yeah, I did a little detective work on this farm.
Of course you did. Do you know where it is? Of course
I did. I think it's in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's just south of Philadelphia. I don't know the name. I don't know the exact town, but that's probably, I was taking little clues from the things that were said and the things that I saw. And it looks like it's probably down near the Maryland border area. So probably a little bit south of Philadelphia, because even Dave picked up on the accents. He said, that sounds like a Pennsylvania accent, because he lived in Pennsylvania for a while years ago. So
real quick update from me. Speaking of farmhouses, I just thought I'd throw this out there because a couple of years ago on this podcast, I think I told the story about my great grandfather's house that I found online through like Ancestry or something like that, right?
Yep.
And I don't know what happened to some of the photos I pulled off there of the house being built and whatever. But a couple of years ago, after reading that the house had been lost in a fire, I was actually I pulled a Sandy gene and I did some investigating and I was able to, with Google Maps help, look for a roof line that might match this house that I was seeing in this one picture. And sure enough, I ended up finding it, blah, 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 ended up going to the house, meeting the folks who lived there, finding my great-grandparents' grave just down the road in the little cemetery, all that stuff. And then literally days later, I fucked up my knee because Sandy didn't think it was important to tell me that the blackbirds were coming to get me. But at any rate, about this damn farm. So I had a birthday last week, and on my birthday, a friend of mine said, isn't this interesting? Your birthday, and this house is listed for sale. And it was a picture of my great-grandfather's house.
Isn't that
it's
something? Way
too expensive. It's like an hour extra away from where I work, so I can't do that. But man, I'm just so drawn to that house. It should be back in the family. And if anybody has about $400,000 to give me so I can buy this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere and then go off and just become a huge hermit, please send it my way. I will take your money.
I was amazed. I knew as soon as I saw it when you sent me the thing, I was like, that's his family.
That's the house.
That's
right?
the house.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. And yeah, it's kind of expensive, but it's a big house. There's land that comes with it. It was a farm. It's, I don't know. It's gorgeous, though. That wraparound porch is just, oh my God, to die for. I would just move out to Wisconsin and live on your porch. I love that porch. Yes, I would.
I'd be calling the local police department. Excuse me, there's a vagrant living on my porch. Could you come out?
Todd, we'd have so much fun. Imagine if we lived in the same city.
No.
Same town.
Absolutely not.
Oh my God. Oh my God. All right, we better wrap it up.
Yeah, probably. Because we'll tell each other how we really feel about one another, and then there'll be no podcast next week.
Todd,
Just
my
kidding.
Little twinsy. All right. That was fun.
Yeah. We got to sneak in our new spiel, right? Do we have a new spiel? Okay.
Let's do it
Let's do it.
Find the Sandy and Toddcast on any of the platforms that you normally find your podcasts. Be sure to like the Sandy and Toddcast on Facebook to keep up on the latest goings-on, including each week's episode. Join our group, Stay Weirdos Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, for even more fun. And And finally, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast and just aren't sure where to start, Sandy and Todd can help with that too. Editing, producing, and consulting is what they do. Like Mind Garden Media on Facebook or email them at themindgardenmedia@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for being weird.
Thanks to Dave for the new spiel.
That's right.
Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Dave.
I was hoping he'd do his English accent just to see if he could do it, but I mean, it's good.
He probably wouldn't have gone that far. So
He doesn't love you that much.
He would try it, but I don't know if his English accent would be that good.
I know, but it would be good to laugh at. Okay, until next week, bye.
Bye.